I focus on our programs, so and down payment assistance is one of the programs. So I'll be presenting today along with Jen, if you want to introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jen Steepleton. I'm a housing development specialist with Division of Housing, and I underwrite the grants and loans for Division of Housing in the Western Slope. So I'm based in Grand Junction. I cover a pretty good chunk of the state, almost all of the Western counties, and I'll cover how to fill out the spreadsheet.
Great. So as Ariel mentioned, if you have questions, please type them in the chat box, and Ariel will read them off as we go. So to get started. So today we're going to talk about the down payment assistance application and how to apply for down payment assistance, a down payment assistance program at the Division of Housing. So the applications are due every year on December 1st. Right now we just have a one-time annual application, and the application can be found on our website. I typically just Google DOLA, DOH application, and it comes up, but here is the actual link for the funding application. And I took a screenshot of what you'll see on the website when you go there, and I highlighted the things that Jen and I are going to go over today, which is the application and the program spreadsheets and the application. And well, we're not going to talk about the application instructions today, but I wanted to highlight that they're there and they contain some valuable information. We will talk about some of the other things on this list as well, but not quite go into as much depth. So the first part that I'm going to talk about is the application itself. So I did come up with a sample application. So here we are. We'll start with this. That might be a little, make it full screen. Zoom out a little bit. Okay. So when you go to our website and you download the application, this is more of the narrative section for our application. And the Division of Housing, some of you may know and some of you may not, we fund a lot of different types of programs and projects and grants and loans and all different types of things throughout the state. And currently we only have one application that is kind of a catch-all. We're actually working on dividing these out. So hopefully by next year, there'll be a separate down payment assistance program application that you'll just use that instead of having to use this catch-all, because as you'll see today, a lot of it is going to be not applicable to this program. So I'm just going to kind of walk you through the parts that are applicable and the parts that are not. So the first part is you request a dollar amount up here, and Jen will show you how we get to that dollar amount on the budget spreadsheets. You fill in your organization name, address. This is pretty self-explanatory. The only part that could be a little confusing is if you are applying for a CDBG, that you will have a subgrantee and you will have a local government that is the applicant. So the local government would fill out their information here, and the subgrantee would fill out their information there. Then as you go below, this is kind of the part where it gets a little into the parts that don't always fit. For example, you're not going to have a specific street address for this project because you're not building a multifamily property at one location. This is a scattered site. Down payment assistance is a scattered site program. So I pick some counties. This is not a real program, but this could be the program for Eagle, Pitkin, and Lake counties. And then you can use the website here to find some of this other information there. So again, homeownership assistance, down payment assistance, pretty self-explanatory. As you get a little lower, site control, not applicable. Zoning, not applicable. Services to the site, not applicable. Then we get into a little more of the narrative piece. So community support. Here you can describe how the community supports your programs. This is a great space to ask programs and organizations in your community to support your program. Can folks advertise the program for you? Can they have brochures in their office? They post it on their website, their Facebook, etc. How can the community support your efforts here. And attach a consolidated plan consistency letter if applicable. So that's only applicable to entitlement areas that receive home or CDBG funds already. Lowering the cost of affordable housing. Again, how is your community committed to lowering the cost of housing in your area? This is where you can also ask organizations to assist you in this endeavor. Continuing bond issuance, not applicable. Project-based vouchers, not applicable. A lot of this is for other projects. So in the narrative, type of housing, so you'll want to attach your program guidelines to this, and you can expand on your program here as well. Newer programs don't always have program guidelines right away, and so that's kind of a little dance that we do if you're not able to submit them with your application, which sometimes folks aren't. So then we'll work with you on getting those in, but we definitely need to have approved program guidelines before you close any loan. But at application, we're not expecting them to be top-notch if you have a new program. So I also think you can fill out location, population served. I know that we have one statewide program that specifically works with folks with disabilities, so that might be something that you could expand on there. A lot of the programs are just open to anyone in the location of the program under the certain AMI levels that are required. Oops, sorry guys. Bedroom mix, this is still, a lot of this isn't going to apply. Local, state, federal subsidies. So how are you funding the program beyond the Division of Housing's money? Do you get $500 from the local government every time you close a loan? Do you have other in-kind? A lot of local government budgets are very tight right now, which is understandable, but maybe they can provide some in-kind resources for you as well. So good place to ask for those and expand on those in our application. And then, so a lot of this other stuff is, again, property management, service commitments, it's not gonna apply. So that's kind of the narrative. Oh, no, there is more. So there is a Performa, it's not a Performa, it's a project spreadsheet that Jen will go over. It's in lieu of a Performa in this case, so Jen will go over that in a little bit. And then going down, again, the regulatory information, this is, some of it applies and some of it doesn't. So there are relocation requirements, which we'll talk about later. So I probably should have checked yes on this, because there are URA requirements for this program that we can discuss later. It's not necessarily one-for-one replacement. Dave's Bacon, no, that does not apply. Environmental review, yes, that applies. If you have federal funds, you'll have to get a release of funds and clear the area that you're working in. But since it's a scattered site program, you don't know specifically which houses are going to be purchased. And so we have you clear the counties that you're working in, and then you review them on an individual scattered site, case by case, before the loan is closed. If you have a state-funded program with our HDG funds, you do not have to provide the environmental review, but you do have to provide a copy of the appraisal that states whether or not the house is located in a floodplain.
Christina, we have our first question. I think it's good segue before we enter the next one. What funding sources can DPA be requested?
Yeah, so that's
CDBG, home.
That's a great question. So currently we have a lot of funding sources at the Division of Housing. Maybe 10 would be my guess off the top of my head. Currently we're funding our down payment assistance programs with CDBG funds, which are federal funds, home funds, and HDG, which are the Housing Development Grant, the state funds. And primarily we fund our programs with CDBG and HDG, the state funds, because they're the kind of the friendliest to this program. Home has some restrictions, which we'll talk about later. But yeah, we use all three of those, and CDBG allows for 80% and below AMI, and home, the federal funding sources allow for 80% and below, and HDG allows for 100% and below, but you can only go up to the 80 to 100% AMI range is only for non-urban areas. So we could not fund an HDG funded down payment assistance program in the city of Denver, for example. We actually had to do kind of a workaround in Weld and Larimer counties because the city of Loveland, the city of Fort Collins, and the city of Greeley are considered urban, and so the program that is operating there right now cannot close an 80 to 100% AMI loan in those areas, but they can in the rest of the counties. So we have done some workarounds like that. So
there is a follow-up
yep.
question. HDG allows for direct application from a nonprofit rather than requiring municipal pass-through, correct?
Yes, that's correct. HDG and home both allow individual organizations to apply straight to the Division of Housing, while CDBG has to be applied to through a local government. And then the organization that is administering the program typically is not the local government, and so they act as the subrecipient. Okay, moving on, lead-based paint. We do have lead-based paint requirements, but they're not, again, the scattered site program, they're not addressed in the application. They're addressed on the HQS form to identify that there's no lead hazards in the house when the HQS inspection is complete. Asbestos, again, scattered site program. Also accessibility and visibility, scattered site program. It's going to vary from house to house. Fair housing, we'll talk about later. We do have an attachment that can be provided for fulfilling fair housing requirements with a program as a whole. Procurement also does not apply because we're not paying vendors for goods or services with these funds for down payment assistance. We're not hiring contractors, for example. Financial management, you'll have to review our CDBG guidebook and make sure that you're complying with our financial management sections of our CDBG guidebook. So I'll leave you to read those today. I don't think we have enough time to cover that. And then program income. So will this project generate program income? Yes, it will. And I noticed our application does not have a spot for HDG funds, but it does for home and CDBG. And program income is the amount of funds that you receive when the loan is paid back. So when you close a loan and the homeowner will make payments to you, or when they sell the house, they will repay the loan. And that money that comes back into your organization is considered program income. And the program income can only be used for closing down payment assistance loans going forward. It cannot be used for anything else. And you have to track it separately. But the benefit is you don't have to return it to the Division of Housing as long as you have an active program. You can continue to use it and have that cash on hand. And then down here, most of these questions also won't apply. So sign the application. These are all attachments, and that should be filled out, completed, and signed. I'll highlight a few of them. So attachment C, suggested format for legal notice. This is for home and HDG funds. All you have to do is post in the paper that you're going to be applying to the Division of Housing for funding. But if you're applying for CDBG in your local government, you have to hold a public hearing announcing, or so folks in your community can come in and express any concerns or comments that they might have with the application. So this is attachment C for CDBG.
Christina, before you move forward, we have a question regarding program income. For HDG funded DPA, does recipient from homeowner of interest also count as program income?
Yes, all principal and interest counts as program income. Attachment D, the Residential Anti-Displacement Relocation Plan. So we will talk more about the URA specific requirements for DPA later. You can fill and complete that out. So you'll have to provide a notice that looks very similar to this. It might be this exact notice, but I'll show you the notice later. And you are sending this to the seller of the home, stating that federal funds or state funds will be used in purchasing this home, and these have to be mailed to each seller, and they have to get this before they close on the loan, so they know that that federal funds or state funds are going into this deal. Davis-Bacon will not apply to down payment assistance. I don't think it ever would. So you can check those boxes. Immigration policy. So our state funds, our HDG funds, require that everyone who receives the funds are lawfully present in the US. So this has to be completed and filled out for everyone in the household who is going to be benefiting from the down payment assistance. For the CDBG and home funds, if a nonprofit has a policy that they make sure that each household member is lawfully present, they have to provide this form. But nonprofits can be exempt from this requirement if they do not have a policy that they do not require everyone is lawfully present. Standard insurance requirements, you have to sign this form and list the Division of Housing as additionally insured on your insurance and make sure you meet all of these. Sometimes for our programs, these requirements don't always make sense, so you can request a waiver for some of these. So if it's something that doesn't make sense for down payment assistance program, we would consider waiving that requirement. But if it's just something that, oh, you only have $500,000 and you should have $1 million, that's something that we look more critically at. Okay, and then we can talk about these attachments later, but this is for CDBG, an intergovernmental agreement. So every jurisdiction that is part of the program should be signing off on this and designating a lead party, which the lead party will be the CDBG applicant. So whatever county or city is applying on behalf of the subgrantee, and then every other county or city that is a part of the program should also sign this one. W-9 needs to be provided, and then attachment K, it's signature authority. So sometimes if a local government is applying for CDBG funds, they'll have to sign the application, but then sometimes they'll authorize the executive director of the subgrantee organization to sign off on pay requests or financial reports or other things like that. And sometimes they don't. It's really up to the program and the local government and how they choose to run. Okay, so that's all on that. So I'm going to turn it over. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and then turn it over to, oh wait, I think I added a little bit more. I forgot. Sorry, Jen. One more slide. So there are some additional application attachments for federal funds. And so they're located on our website. So I'll show you right here. So LM through R. And the first is the 504 self-evaluation plan that's required for federal funds, so CDBG and home. Steps to affirmatively further fair housing. This is required for federal funds, but fair housing is a law, and so we do encourage it for state funds as well. It's a pretty simple checklist, so if you're willing to fill it out and send it in, that would be appreciated and preferred on our end. Affirmative fair housing marketing plan, you may know this if you have ever built multifamily properties, and in that case, it's a specific plan for that property But in the case of programs like down payment assistance, it's a plan for the program. So how are you going to be marketing the program in the areas that you're serving? Attachment O, P, Q, and R are specific for CDBG. And we would prefer these at application, but as we've had some local governments note that they might only meet once a month to approve and sign things. And so if you can't submit it at application due to timing, that's okay, but we've started to make these conditions of funding requirements, so we won't execute a grant with you until we have all of these things from you. And we really should be getting them from each participating jurisdiction, which that's a change from the past, because in the past, we had only been asking for these forms O through R in particular, P, Q, and R in particular, from the local government that was applying, but per the CDBG regs, they really should be provided for each jurisdiction that's participating in the program. And so that's a change. And so we've really been working and trying to roll it out slowly with the programs that are already active, because sometimes it takes time to get these forms signed, and we understand that. So we've been pretty willing to work with folks on that. Okay, so now I will turn it over to Jen. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Okay. Wait a second. Now it's my turn. Present. Okay. Okay. So when you get on our website to download the application and the spreadsheet, the first thing you're going to notice when the spreadsheet opens is that there's a lot of tabs in there. So the spreadsheet is the one that we use for all of our programs. There's a lot of not DPA things in there. So the first thing you're going to want to do is hide all of those tabs that do not say DPA in the very beginning. There's a lot of extras. You don't need to fill out anything that does not say DPA for down payment assistance. So you go ahead and just right click and hide all of those. So the first one, once you do that, you'll be left with 3 tabs. There's one for the budget, one for assessment, and one for staff allocation. I would, if it was me filling out one of these, I would start with the assessment tab. It's going to kind of lay the groundwork for a lot of other information. So this is the one that I would start with. And I filled in some basic information. You want to start at the top. Here's the program name, down payment assistance, standard across the board. Application due date is December 1st, but you can put in whatever date you happen to be filling it out. It does not matter to us. Applicant is the name of your agency, whoever is applying for the funds. If it's a local government, put that local government in there, but we also want to know who's the actual agency running the program. So that information is also really helpful. And then spreadsheet version, that doesn't really matter. I just put test in here. Chances are if you're submitting the application, it's version 1, and we might go through a few of them as we underwrite, but that's not on you, that's on your development specialist. So then you go through the first bit, it's program portfolio information. So this is all dependent on the program that you're currently running. If you're a new applicant and you don't have a program, you're not going to have anything to fill in here, and that's okay. There are a couple lines to note. The very first one is current number of loans in the portfolio. If you're a new program, it's 0. Whoever or whatever your actual number of loans is, just fill that in. Average number of loans per year. If you're a new program, put in the estimate that you think you're going to go for. If it's 5 loans, put that in. If it's 10, whatever. Programs that have been up and running for a while, it could be 20, whatever average you're hoping for the year. And then your average loan amount. Again, new programs, make an educated guess. Your development specialist can work with you on figuring out what that number should be. But more programs that have been up and running for a while, just take a look through your history and figure out what the average loan amount has been and put that in. Again, a lot of this is going to depend on the program that you're already running, and new programs won't have anything. That's okay. So then, again, number of new loans. For programs that have been up and running for a while, we do 3-year contracts. So this would be the total for 3 years. For new programs, we like to start you off with a 1-year contract just to make sure that our guesses are somewhat accurate to see how well the program does. If it's taking off more than we expected, that's great. If not, then we just make some adjustments for future contracts, but we like to start you off with just 1 year. So it's whatever the number of new loans you think you can do for that year. If you are a program that's been running for a while, this next line is the number of loans you think you'll be able to make out of your program income. If you don't have any program income, then you don't put anything in there. And then the next line would be the number of loans that would be funded through new funding from the Division of Housing. Not covered by program income, in other words. Loan information, this depends on the program that you want to run and your qualifications of the applicants. We've got all kinds of guidelines for how that works. And then market information is, again, going to depend on your area. So it's talking about the number of affordable homes for sale, purchase prices, average prices. If you have been discussing this program in your community for a long time and you've gotten a lot of interest, we want to know that roughly. And so this one is number of applicants on a waiting list. You don't actually have to have a waiting list. You could just put down like the number of people that you know are interested. If you're a new program, really we're looking for it's market information to know that the program is going to be successful. And then again, if you're just a new program starting out, we'll work with you and do our best to guess what reality is going to be like, and make adjustments as needed for the first year and then future contracts. And again, just to note here, qualifying household income, it depends on the funding source that you go for and what's the need in your community. So with CDBG and home funds, we can only go up to 80% of AMI. A lot of the communities that I work with on the Western Slope, they say that we don't really have a need for down payment assistance at that AMI. We need the 80 to 100. And they are rural areas, so they qualify for the program funded through HDG at that point. But that's, you'll have to look into some of your market information and what is 80% AMI or below for your area to fill that in. And then for other criteria, this is kind of for staff. Some of it does not really apply to DPA. Like we're not making energy efficiency improvements to properties, so I don't know that this is really a thing that you need to worry about. Administrative costs per loan, I'll get into that in a little bit. You can go back and fill that out. But if you leave this blank, that's okay. It's more for staff than anything. So that's it for this tab. It's pretty straightforward. You should be able to access all of this information if you are a program that's been up and running for a while. And if you're not, then that's okay. Most of it won't apply to you. And then we move on. So then the next one I would do is the staff allocation tab. So this is where you spell out which of your staff is going to work on this program, how much of their time is going to be spent on this program, and how is the rest of their time paid for. So these are just a couple of example positions that are thrown in. You can override any of these and name or put in whoever. So smaller programs might only have one person. Larger programs could have a half a dozen. Whatever it is for you, that's fine. You just put in the title and their total salary for what they make through the year, totaled across all the programs that they work on. This next column is the percent of their time that is you're expecting them to spend on the down payment assistance program. or the amount of time that you know that they spend on down payment assistance. And then all of the totals at the bottom are all formulas that are generated automatically when you fill in everything that's in yellow. So you don't need to touch anything that's purple. That's automatically taken care of for you. It's as you fill in the yellow ones that things will auto-populate. And then as you go, you'll want to fill in, maybe some of these didn't carry over when I copied it. Maybe you spend some of your time on an SFOO, single family owner occupied rehab program. A lot of our programs kind of double dip, so they have the same person spending some of their time on down payment assistance, some spend their time on rehab, whatever the case may be. For each position that you list here, you'll want to account for their time across the board, because we do want to know how else is this position funded. Where else is your time paid for? So then this could be maybe real estate development. That's something that we would expect an executive director to spend a lot of time on, maybe not so much a program specialist, and that's okay. It's whatever other programs your staff and you spend your time working on, we want to see that filled out on here, and just make sure that at the end everything totals 100%. Because then we'll ask, you're going to get asked questions about that if it doesn't, like where else is this time spent? Or is there just a typo, like maybe we forgot to hit a 0 and this is 1% of their time instead of 10%. You'll just get asked questions about that, and that's no big deal. And these two, I would say total salary and the percent of their time on DPA, that's important for the budget, and there's a couple of tricks I can show you for making sure that works. So then the next tab you go for is the budget tab. And there is a lot of information in here, so we'll just go through it. The first line is number of loans, and the number you want to plug in here is whatever your average loan amount is times the number of new loans you're expecting to close during that contract period. So in this case, I just said the average loan amount is $21,250, and they're expecting to do 15 new loans in this period. So then that is, you can see there's a formula built in there. It just makes everything, makes everything easier when you don't mess up your own formulas. Then you'll plug in what is requested from the state. You can do like partial, and then you'll see this automatically fills in the difference for other funds, and then you'll just want to note the source over here. So if it's Division of Housing funding, that's what you're requesting from us, that's what you put in. If it's from your program income, you can put that in there. You can add a line if that makes more sense. Whatever helps you visualize what this is going to look like, that's fine. Your development specialist is going to make a lot of changes to this anyway, and a lot of tweaks and adding formulas. So that's fine. We'll work pretty closely together, so not to worry. Then the next few would be estimated mortgages for the program across the 15 loans, an estimate of the closing costs, and again, sources for those. You are not the permanent lender. We are not the permanent lender, so that's sources go in there. Home buyer counseling is part of down payment assistance now, so you'll want to note that in your budget and who is paying for that. So what we do look for is that not everything is being requested from Division of Housing, that there is some kind of local funding commitment, either from the local government, the agency running the program, maybe there's another nonprofit or like a local real estate group that wants to contribute somehow. Whatever the case may be for your community, we will look for other funding sources in here to make sure that the rest of the program is covered, because there are limits to what Division of Housing can fund. And so then this line is not currently built into our spreadsheet. I'm hoping we can get that taken care of and update the spreadsheet so that by the time you get to the December 1st deadline, that is built in. So this is something you can add yourself if it's not in there. That's what we did for this. It's just a total that helps kind of visualize all of the things under this particular line. So for all program activities, that's your total, $3.5 million. What is requested from Division of Housing, and then what's the difference covered by other sources. So then these are the big things for your development specialist to look at. It's project delivery and program overhead. So project delivery is anything that is associated with actually delivering the program to your community. So it's the person running the down payment assistance program. There are a couple other things that can be included in there. We have them all in our revolving loan fund guidelines of what constitutes project delivery versus program overhead, and that it's kind of a fine line, but we know the rules pretty well. So if you've got something in there that doesn't look quite right, we'll ask and we'll work with you to kind of fix that and get it corrected. So then one of the formulas I like to build in is for the staff that's actually running the program. You can build in a formula that will link back to your staff allocation tab. So that's what I did here. This is 50% of this person's time. And it's automatically built in there. So then you'd say, well, I'm requesting this much from Division of Housing. This is the difference that will be covered by my fake name of Unaffordable County Housing Authority. And then committed or pending, just to note, if it's funding that you know you have lined up ready to go, like it's something out of your own budget and you're committing it to the program, it's committed. So make sure you note that. And again, you just kind of walk through what all these costs you think they're going to be. We want it to be based on actual expenses, so take a look at your history as you've run the program for a while. If you're a new program, just do your best to guess. Your development specialist can work with you to come up with numbers that are pretty reasonable. And then again, we added another line for totals. So this is everything for project delivery, what's requested from the state, and the difference that will be made up by other sources. Program overhead should be everything that's associated with supporting actual delivery of the program. So it's like keeping the lights on and the doors open, making sure your people have the equipment that they need to run the program. Your executive director, it's anything for overseeing the program. So again, I built in another formula of the executive director's time spent on DPA, not their whole time. You can walk through operating expenses. So this would be maybe a portion of the rent for the space you're occupying, equipment and materials, whatever you need to support the program, not to actually run the program, that's project delivery. Whatever these numbers are going to be, take a look at your actual expenses. We want it to be based off of that. And then again, we added totals at the bottom for everything under program overhead, what's requested from the state, and what will be covered by other funding sources. So one of the first things we'll get asked, development specialists will get asked is, well, how much can I actually request from Division of Housing? There are limits to what we can do. So one thing you want to do is fill this in and have a pretty good idea of what you want to ask the state for, and then do a quick check. So off to the side, you can say, if this is the total requested from the state for project delivery, I want to do that divided by, I think we said 15 loans estimated. So I'm requesting $1,748 from the state for project delivery. So within our ranges, that's fine. We can go up to $2,000 per loan for project delivery and up to $1,500 per loan for program overhead. So that's within range, that's fine. If something's different, like let's say we're gonna only guess at closing 10 loans, $2,600, that is outside our ranges. We cannot fund that high. So the most we can do is $2,000. Your development specialist will end up asking you if we can only fund up to $2,000 for project delivery, where do you anticipate coming up with the additional $623 per loan? We're going to end up asking about that because we cannot fund anything higher. We want everything to fall within our ranges, so we'll work with you to make sure that the spreadsheet is adjusted to reflect that, and go from there. So just do quick checks for yourself as you go of what these totals are divided by the number of loans you're expecting. And just a quick note as I finish up. So the DPA budget is, again, this is just 1 year. So if you are a new program, you only need to fill out 1 year because we're probably only going to do a 1-year contract. If you have been up and running for a while and we're going to do a 3-year contract, then you'll want to do one for the total 3-year contract, but then make copies. Create a copy. So now you've got a second version of this. So you can rename it. I'm going to do this as budget year 1. And then you'll go and adjust your numbers on how many loans do you think you can actually do in the first year versus the total over 3. And then you'll want to do this again for year 2 and year 3. So we want to know the total for the whole 3-year program, and then what you're expecting for each individual year. And then we'll go through and kind of work with you on do we need to factor in some cost increases or something else that you're expecting to happen in the next 3 years while the program is running. Like maybe you increase the number of loans that you are able to close, and that would be great. So maybe by year 1, you start with 10. By year 3, you're up to 16. That's great. If that's realistic for your program, then build in your numbers based off of that, and then we'll walk you through or go through the underwriting with you and walk through anything else. So I guess I'll stop sharing and kick it back to Christina. And if you have questions, put them in the chat box, please.
Okay, sorry, I'm just getting things settled here. Okay, so we just have a few final kind of items to share. Let me see if I can this. Can't click that button without this. Oops. Okay, so just a few items that I wanted to share. So Jen covered the program budget. The next is the environmental review, which we touched upon. So just a reminder for CDBG and home, make sure to complete CENST, which is located in our CDBG guidebook. I typically get there by Googling DOH CDBG guidebook, and it'll come up. In the environmental review section, there's a CENST that has to be completed prior to closing any loans. Ideally, it should be completed prior to contracting. It's a very simple form. You'll fill out that it's a scattered site project and that you'll evaluate you'll complete a regulatory checklist before each loan is closed. So a regulatory checklist must be provided prior to closing each loan. If you do not do this prior to closing each loan, we cannot fund that loan with federal funds. So if you have a CDBG or home contract. So this is very important. And it's very minor, the work is very minor for down payment assistance because you have an individual choosing a home that they want to live in. And so it's not like our rehab programs or our big multifamily programs where these are a lot of work. It should take 10 minutes. You'll get it signed by your asset manager, and then you can close the loan after that. And part of the review of the regulatory checklist is to point out houses that are not eligible for down payment assistance, which are any homes in the floodway and homes in 100 or 500 year floodplain. And those are things you cannot get out of. There's another question on the regulatory checklist that addresses how close you are to the nearest airport. And if you end up having a house that is close to an airport, you can work with our environmental compliance officer, and he can work with you on addressing whether or not we can clear that house. It seems that in most cases we can clear houses, even if they are located next to a runway, but you just talk to Brett about that. Voluntary acquisition notice, this needs to be provided for all federal funds. So again, I talked about this earlier, you send a letter to each seller of the house prior to purchasing the home. You have to maintain proof of delivery in each client file. So that typically what I see is a copy of the letter, and you'll want to maintain records for when you mailed it or how you delivered it. And there's additional information in HUD's handbook 1378, also the RLF guidelines, an example letter that you can provide. I know that one time we did get dinged from HUD for an agency keeping an Excel spreadsheet saying, oh, I sent it to this address at this time, and this is how I sent it, and they kind of compiled all the addresses in there, and HUD did not think that was acceptable. So make sure that you're keeping a copy of the letter and also following the other rules. I'm sorry, I have a smoke alarm in my house going off. I hope you can't hear that. Maximum purchase price. So a home has a maximum purchase price. They are issued every year, and they're by county, and it's what is it? It's 95% of the area median purchase price, and you can find it on HUD's website. I think they're usually issued around April every year. They're updated annually. We do not have purchase price limits for HDG or CDBG, so that's only for home. So that's kind of in Colorado, there are a lot of expensive parts of the state currently, as I'm sure you're aware. And so if the house exceeds the price that is listed by HUD, they cannot, a person receiving down payment assistance cannot purchase that house. So it's kind of a barrier, and we try to, so we do not apply that to HDG or CDBG funded programs just because of the barrier. And then, but we do use that 95% of the area median purchase price in order to set our maximum loan amount, which is for all programs, the maximum loan amount you can provide in each county is 10% of that area median purchase price. So, for example, if you are a multi-jurisdictional, multi-county program, each year you're probably going to be updating your maximum loan amounts to be 10% of the area median purchase price that's introduced by HUD every year. So annually in April, you're probably going to be, they're going to be releasing new ones, and you might have, if you have 5 counties, you might have 5 different maximum loan amounts. And a lot of times agencies will end up rounding them because it could be a weird number. So they might round to 15,000 or they might round to 16,000. That's typically what I see to keep it easy. So this year, we also introduced some new underwriting standards that were mandated by HUD. And so the full extent of the underwriting standards are outlined in our RLF guidelines, but I just wanted to touch on a few of them. So first one is you have to evaluate the primary mortgage of the home buyer just to make sure it's not a risky loan, that they're not getting some predatory loan and they're going to go into foreclosure, and our down payment assistance loan is going to be lost. So we want to make sure that the home buyer is getting into a situation where they will succeed in homeownership as much as possible. Part 5, annual gross income is used for purposes of calculating income to qualify applicants, but you can use an alternative method for underwriting standards. You just have to establish what your method is for underwriting. Generally, our front-end ratio is going to be 31 to 35%, and back-end ratio is going to be 43 to 55%. There are exceptions, so look in the RLF guidelines. as everyone knows, Colorado housing prices are very high right now, and a front-end ratio of 31 to 35% does not work in a lot of areas. So we do have some workarounds that I think have been working out for most agencies, and those are listed in the RLF guidelines. Agencies have to evaluate a borrower's monthly expenses, assets, cash reserves, and some other information. So just make sure you check out the RLF guidelines for full details on all of the underwriting that does need to occur. And other DPA considerations. We prefer that you set a minimum client income of 50% AMI. So, you know, if you have a federally funded program, you're going to be looking at folks 50 to 80% AMI, in the 50 to 80% AMI range. Sometimes there are applicants who are buying a Habitat home or working with some other program that we see the lower AMIs. I think I saw someone at, you know, 35% a few weeks ago, which is low, but you know, depending kind of what program they're in, it might make sense. If they're not in a program and it's someone walking off the street at 30% AMI, you know, you're really going to want to critically look at that and make sure that they're going to be able to afford the home that they're purchasing. The home has to be the primary residence through the affordability period. So down payment assistance has an affordability period. For HGG and CDBG, it is 5 years. For home, it is a minimum of 5, and it gets to be more. I think it goes up to 15 based off of the loan amount. So if you're having a higher loans like $30,000, it's going to be a longer period. And we use the recapture model for down payment assistance. So if they do sell the house within 5 years, that the primary residence or the affordability period goes away. So that withdraws that. They don't have to live there for 5 years if they're selling the house and moving somewhere else. And the last thing is the housing acquired must meet state, local, HQS, and code requirements. So if the house does not meet HQS when they're purchasing the house, that's okay, but it has to be rehabbed and brought up to HQS. So sometimes down payment assistance programs will partner with a rehab program. That we haven't been seeing that as much recently because of the debt to income ratios. It's, you know, a lot of folks can't afford multiple loans. And then what I more commonly see is that there needs to be a smoke alarm in the kitchen, carbon monoxide, you know, they need to fix a window, something like that. And a lot of times the home buyer or the seller is, you know, paying for those out of their pockets before closing. So that's more common. It's just the minor fixes rather than a rehab loan. So that is all that that I have for you today. So if there are any other questions, we can take questions. Otherwise, we can let you out a little early.
And feel free to unmute yourself to ask questions. You don't have to use the chat box.
And so Reed asked about the max overhead, and just so everyone knows, the maximum admin amounts are in our application instructions. They're not on the actual application itself, and they're not in the RLF guidelines. They're in the application instructions, and so that's they're kind of they've been hidden. So make sure that's where you look for them.
Well, if there aren't any other questions, I'm not seeing any pop up. Thank you all for joining us today. You can always reach out. Oh, go ahead.
I was curious about the immigration form. So can you touch back on that again? If we have a policy that says that not everyone in the home needs to be lawfully present, then only, and we're talking about home ownership here, only the, I wasn't quite clear on who does have to be legally present.
Hey, Julia, do you mind taking this question?
Yeah, so a lot of this comes back to what your source of funds are, okay? And so you're going to want to double check with your asset manager, especially because I know sometimes organizations are using one source of funds and then maybe switch, right? So maybe historically you've worked with HDG and then more recently they have shifted to CDBG or home. So it's just really important to double check whether or not that's a requirement of your contract. But if you have a federal funding source, there's an exemption that is allowed if you are a nonprofit and it is not your standard practice to require that folks are lawfully present, and you're able to document this and truly show this is not your normal requirement, then you can take advantage of that exemption. However, if that's not the case, then you're required to ensure that folks are lawfully present. There isn't that same exemption for our HDG, our state-funded programs.
So that exemption only exists for CDBG and home funds, but not HDG.
Correct. And even with that, it's, it is a narrow exemption. So you would need to have that clearly documented that is your practice as a nonprofit. But yeah, state funds do not have that exemption made available.
And the documentation in the in the program guidelines?
It's in the application. So there's a form in the application, and your asset manager can provide you a blank copy of that, but there's a sample form in there. And I'll answer Steve's question. So Steve asked if it's a reimbursement model, and yes, it is a reimbursement model. So like the project delivery and program overhead numbers that Jen was touching on earlier, we pay you that after you close the loan, and we can reimburse you for loan funds after you close the loan. And that is how we do all of our contracts. And I believe it's a state requirement. And so that is not something that is easy to change. Some things, you can push us on a little bit, but that is likely not one of the things that you can really push.
Do we have any other questions? All right, well, thank you everyone so much. And thank you, Christina and Jen, for presenting today on the DPA application. Like I said, we are having monthly webinars. Next month on December 9th will be our CDBG overview. So feel free to go to our website and register for that webinar if you are interested. Otherwise, I hope you all enjoy the rest of your day, and thanks for joining us.